Okay, so this Q&A is answering, I forgot who I'm answering, Jason. Which resin should I use? And when we say resin, we're talking about DI resin. And the reason we're using DI resin is to demineralize the water. So we have some other videos about how resin works, but in order to understand which resin you want to use, you've really got to understand how resin works. And I've got a really cool video coming out on how resin works, even more complex than this one, but this is kind of like a general chat. So in order to understand how resin works, you have to understand what minerals are. And minerals are in water, like if we say there's calcium in water in the form of lime or something like that, it's not just a calcium molecule sitting in the water. It came into the water as a compound, because everything has a positive or a negative charge in chemistry. So calcium has a 2+ charge, so it then forms a compound with carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, other, chlorine, whatever things, and it forms a compound, and that becomes a molecule. And so in order to form a compound, if calcium is 2+, then the total sum of the pluses and minuses in this compound will balance to 0. And so we're going to have some minerals or gases, basically elements that are in minus, and we're going to have calcium, which is plus.
Sounds like we're going to space.
Yeah, it's a whole new world happening down there at water level, When we use DI resin for demineralizing water in window cleaning, what we're looking to do is to remove the minerals. And so we use mixed bed resin, which is a percentage of the mixed bed of resin is positively charged, and a percentage of the mixed bed of resin is negatively charged. The negatively charged will attract the positively charged elements, and the positively charged will attract the negatively charged elements. Okay?
So why don't the negative and the positive resin? I know it's a stupid question.
Oh my, yeah. So
is that too much?
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But they don't. So they don't neutralize themselves, and I've actually never he's ever asked me that. Why don't they neutralize themselves when they're in mixed bed?
But they don't. That's the great thing.
Most important is they don't. So now we're going to run the water through the resin, and there are a couple of things that affect the performance of the resin. It's the contact time of the water with the resin. That's the most important one, which is determined by the flow rate. If you've got 1/4 of a gallon a minute going through, you could have less resin. If you've got 1/2 a gallon a minute going through, then you need more resin. So the higher TDS, you might see people go to Culligan's or National DI and they buy great big 1 cubic foot tanks, and that gives you more contact time. They're hugely heavy and totally impractical for any other reason except if you have a high TDS, the contact time is long enough for them to take more TDS out. So we would normally say our recommendation is the dual DI tanks. Each tank is 1/4 of a cubic foot, so we give you 1/2 a cubic foot of resin in the kit, or the capacity to hold half a cubic foot of resin, and then that gives you the time through the first tank, the time through the second tank, and out. So we say normally you would use that up to TDS 150, right? And TDS is the measure of the electrical conductivity of water, and the more TDS, the more minerals that are in the water, the more conductive it is. If the water is pure, the water is not conductive, doesn't conduct electricity, so you get a TDS reading of 0, right? Then you have pure water. And the performance of a TDS meter, by the way, changes by 5% per degree. So as long as your TDS is under 10, 100%, you've got spot-free water, and quite often it could be as high as 20, and we know from our experience in Sydney you can get spot-free water as high as TDS 50 because of the different minerals that are in the water, but we'll cover that. In fact, I think we've already covered that one, haven't we?
I think so.
The colour of the minerals determines the visibility of the spot.
We have.
Right?
It's a previous workshop, actually.
On that. Okay, So we want to work out which DI resin do I choose, and we have. So there's another point that I think is relevant is that the beads that are charged positively and negatively are charged like a battery to certain levels. So there's 12 ohm, 15 ohm, 18 ohm. 18 ohm is pretty much what you use in a nuclear reactor. They use the water. If you look at Fukushima, after the
accident,
the overheating,
tsunami.
So they've been running water through there, and they've got millions of tons of radioactive water that they're going to. I think they've already started releasing it into the Pacific Ocean. So what is that water? Well, that water was DI water charged to 18 ohms, running through the reactor, catching isotopes of uranium and plutonium and other EMs, right? Radioactive stuff. So that's that 18 ohm. That's nuclear grade for nuclear plants. Now, if you go back 15 years, 15 ohm was the maximum charge possible. So 15 ohm was determined the nuclear grade. So we now can buy nuclear grade at an affordable level because it costs a lot more to increase the charge on the resin. So, but some of the cheaper stuff that's out there, which you may not recognize, and there's no way to tell except how long does my resin last, and you can't easily tell how long your resin lasts because you take, as a window cleaner, you take it from one water source to another water source to another water source to another water source as you clean windows. So you might go to an area where you've put well water through it, and of course it expires really, really quickly. So it's very difficult to measure. You have to really think about who's selling it to you as to whether they've charged to 12 ohms and charge you the same, or whether they've charged to 15 ohms and deliver you, the nuclear grade. And some people don't even say nuclear grade, so then you can assume it's charged to 12 ohms, which means it works exactly the same, still brings your water down to TDS 000, but it doesn't last as long. Yeah, that's really the point. Okay, so now you understand, how DI resin works, what's in there, it's positive and negative. Why do we have a hard water blend of DI resin? And we say it's for hard water areas, but most people think that hard water means high TDS, but that's not actually true. Hard water, by definition, is a much higher percentage of the minerals that are in the TDS being hardness, which is calcium and magnesium compounds, right? And we get the calcium and magnesium compounds usually through aquifers where the water is running through underground rivers and porous rock. The most likely porous rock is a lime-based rock, right? So you get the magnesium and the calcium from the rock. It goes into solution.
Is that
right?
like where all the expensive water is getting
yeah,
it's
it's a great question because
Pellegrino,
San Pellegrino TDS is 1,000.
Perrier water.
Water, they've gone through all these underground areas and then they just pump it up and it's TDS 1,000.
So those Perrier and South Pellegrino are hard watered.
They're really hard water. Yeah, but they're not all. Well, they're high TDS water. That's hard water.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're very high in silicates, not high in calcium, and not high in magnesium. Right? Now, how do you know you've got high TDS water? Well, one, you can Google water quality report, my town, right? And you press enter, and then you read down until you find your local water department, right? And usually there's a real report sitting there probably annually. In America, it's pretty much annually, and in Australia, maybe you get it monthly. And then somewhere in there it'll have calcium, CaCO3, right, which is the calcium carbonate, which is the most likely form of calcium in tap water. And they'll give it to you as a hardness rating. And the hardness rating will be in milligrams per liter or ppm or any of these. But it'll be in the same logic as total dissolved solids or TDS. And so you can actually look at the hardness of water. Let's say the hardness is 100 and the TDS is 150. Then you know 100 of the 150 is calcium magnesium based, which then makes it hard. If you have hard water and you use normal soap, then you'll get a soap scum, right? It's another way. If you use your kettle or your iron, the shot of steam with the iron, and out comes a whole lot of white hard stuff, that is calcium scale, right? Same stuff came from your tap water if you don't use water softener in your water supply in your home. So there are a number of ways to recognize that there's a lot of calcium in the water. So if there is a lot of calcium in the water, like more than half of the minerals in the water are calcium magnesium based, or hardness as it's normally called in a water quality report, then you would be better to use a hard water blend, which is 65% of the beads are charged negative to attract the 2+ positive of the calcium. And we've got another video that will show exactly how this happens at a molecular level, because calcium carbonate is one calcium, one carbon, and 3 oxygens. The oxygens are gas, right? So they don't get, the oxygens don't get drawn to the bead, right?
So it doesn't spot.
So, well, no, they don't get the oxygen doesn't use up the terminals on the DI resin. When we do the magnet video, that'll make more sense. So we use a magnet to show you what a DI resin bead is, and we've got another one on calcium carbonate, so you can understand what's happening there. So if you the summary is that if you have more than 50% of the TDS is hardness, doesn't matter if it's in ppm or milligrams per liter, as long as they've both got the same scale. ppm is milligrams per liter, by the way. So then you'll get you'd get more performance, a longer life, because what happens as the water's going through your DI resin, one side of the resin will expire before the other side, right? So if you've got 50-50 resin and then you run it until it exhausts, the TDS will go 10, let's say you've got TDS 100 in, right? So we've got a benchmark. You've got a TDS 100 in, and you're using a 60-40 resin, right? So that we can understand which one's which. Then if you get it goes up to TDS 10, which is when you'd normally replace it, but you keep working, or in dual DI tank systems, you've got the second DI tank anyway, so it's going to catch what the first one misses. That's the redundancy reason why we always have 2 DI tanks. And so the TDS will creep up, and then it'll hold at a certain level. And I can tell you what that level is. It's either going to be 60 or 40, because one side of the resin expired first. It's full. It can't hold any more. It's just chock-a-block with minerals, right? And they're only attracted ionically. And the more it's attracted ionically, the less battery power, it's 15 ohms is holding all this resin for as long as it can, but that charge is being diminished. So you'll see it go to 40, and then it'll hold at that point for some period of time, and the length of that period of time is showing you that the other side of the resin is working, right? The 60% side is working still. It's still taking the 60% minerals out on normally a 60-40 would be to take the calciums out. But we go to 65-35 because there's that much more calcium in that what's actually hard water with high hardness, right? So we give you 65% of the beads to catch the calcium, 35% of the beads to catch the other minerals and the nitrates and the sulfides and the anyway, all the other ones, and they're all compounds, and they all break in half, and gases keep going, minerals get caught.
Should have the periodic table to show.
Yes, I gave that to Ollie.
Oh, given away for education.
We made a video on it, right? There is a video on the periodic table. Did we ever publish it?
Yeah, yes. I'm pretty sure it's a workshop that we published where I edited in the periodic table to
So if you've got a periodic table and you're facing me, for me, looking at you, calcium, magnesium, lithium, sodium, they're all in this top corner here. So for you,
probably
it'll be
in the other corner,
over in that corner there when, you're looking at me.
Yeah, but it's pretty cool to check it out.
And they all dry white, right? So then you have white, and white is the reflection of light. So white is more visible than black, and black is actually not visible except by contrast. So the minerals that dry white, you can have less TDS and you'll get a more visible spot, whereas the minerals that dry black, you've got as much TDS as you want and you'll never see them because they just absorb light. That's what black does. Black absorbs light, white reflects light.
So basically, before you get your resin, you should check with your local government about the water, how the hardness, and if it's soft or hard.
Yeah.
And then you can decide on the kind of type of resin that would be beneficial for your...
Yes, and as a rule, we can put some rules in place, right? So as a rule, water with low TDS comes from a water supply, which would be a lake. So it's mostly rainwater that runs across the top of ground, right? And then it picks up minerals across the top of the ground, and then fertilizers and the additives that the farmers do, and then the decaying vegetation as it goes, through the forests and all that. So there's a mineral uptake by the water as it goes across land. So it'll end up at TDS, like where we are, it's about TDS 35. Melbourne, Australia is TDS 35-40. Sydney is around 100, 110.
Actually, I have an aquarium and I'm checking the TDS every 2-3 days. So it's 0.025.
Oh, so it's 25, right?
Unless my TDS meter is correct.
No, even 25 is likely for here because we have a lot of lakes here. And so the water is it's basically rainwater going into a lake, pumped into your town supply system, and some chlorine added or ammonium chloride or whatever.
So if you live in the mountain area, it could be a little different.
Yeah, you can catch rainwater, and then it's just, some minerals will be picked up off the roof and stuff like that because the dust and the dirt.
Or even rocky area.
I mean, dust and dirt are not TDS, by the way, but the contact with dust and dirt can have a mineral exchange.
It can leave a spot. Anyway, right?
Well, not often.
No.
It depends what's in the tank, and it depends on this interaction ionically. And what's in the sky as it falls down, you get acid rain in Germany and stuff like that from the big industrial areas, and that's obviously means that there's some minerals in the, some acids in the rain, stuff like that. So if now sometimes you'll get town supply that comes from a lake on one side of the city and town supply that comes from aquifers on the other side of the city. So Perth, Australia, South Perth, TDS is 120 through to 150 from a couple of different sources. And North Perth, it's like 350 to 450. So so on the south side of the river, the water supply for the residents of the city are being supplied from rainwater through a lake and catchment, and the north side of Perth is being fed from aquifers, the water being gathered underground, and it's not I don't know that it's high calcium there, but we could look that up. I did look it up for Peter actually.
Peter Thomas, our good friend in Australia.
Friend. Yeah. So if you, the thing is, you can look up your water quality report, or you could go, like for Americans, you can go to zerowater.com, 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 and you can look up, scroll down on the front page until it says, what's my TDS? Put in your zip code, and it'll come up with a TDS reading. Now, if that TDS reading is under 150, I wouldn't go any further. I'd just get standard resin. But if it's 250, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800. maybe you don't want to use DI resin that high, but you know what I mean? If it's over 150 or over 120 even, then you could go to the water quality report because there may be some savings, right? If more than half of the minerals in the water are hardness. How's that? That's complex, right? It's a simple question.
Yeah, but it's good. It's nice when you compare it to when you give some example. It's easier to understand, even for me as an amateur.
Yes. Yes, and to understand what's happening. So we've got some other videos. We'll show you what's happening at a molecular level, so you can get a better visualization rather than just listening. But I think that's pretty much a very good guide for you. You know, if TDS under 120, don't bother. Just buy standard. TDS over 120, then it'd be worth having a look at your water quality report. Then in the water quality report, they'll give you information about water source, and so you'll see in bigger cities, then you'll see the water is coming from different locations as they service, new developments and stuff like that.
Huge cities, I can imagine.
Yeah, like I think Sydney's got about 6 water supplies, to service Sydney, and then the other point which is relevant to a lot of people in America is that they are in counties, and you might find that a town has a water supply, like we call it town water, right? That's what, I don't know, everybody's probably got their own name for it, but it's town water supply. And town water supply may be lake water, but as soon as you go and clean somebody's windows outside of town water supply, they're now on well water, so they've got their own pump and
So you're saying you should have 2 different type of resin in your bag?
No,
depending on
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think if you're cleaning a lot of well water, then you're better to go to a reverse osmosis DI type system, an RODI system. For the RODI system, just for the relevance of this conversation, the principle is that DI resin is a low cost to purchase water filtration system that has a high running cost. And reverse osmosis systems with DI, by the way, they've all got DI, they are a high cost to purchase system with a low running cost. So the best analogy for that is that DI systems are like inkjet printers, RO systems are like laser printers, right? A laser printer costs a lot more, but it costs less to run. Inkjet printers cost $99, and they cost a lot to run, $99 a cartridge or something.
Yeah,
But we all buy those inkjet printers
I know.
because it depends how much you're using it, right? So sometimes it pays.
If you're thinking long term, right?
Yeah.
Long term.
And then in reverse osmosis, somebody goes, you need an RO system. That's never true. And the ROs, and do you need an RO system, is completely a business decision. The final spot-free water filter on every system is DI, whether it's a DI only or an RODI. So you must have a DI system. The question is, do you need pre-filters that are reverse osmosis? And
to lower your resin.
To take the minerals out. They take it out for free. We use water pressure and a reverse osmosis going from a high concentration to a low concentration.
And not for free, because you still have to change your sediment filter, carbon filter.
And you still use some DI, but it's about a 95% reduction in DI cost. So if you can get a return on investment in that in a year, then it's worth it. So if you're spending over $1,500 to $2,000 in a year on DI resin, then like an RO system is going to pay for itself, and then you'll keep using it for years after that, right? But if you may rather use DI resin. DI resin is so easy. There's no temperature issues. There's no water pressure issues. It's so easy to use. It's just plug and play. And there are guys in the industry who have got big teams and they only use DI. Regardless of the hardness, easy to change.
Some RO systems are super big.
Yeah.
Heavy.
And if you're up in the north, Canada, North America, the temperature of the water changes the performance from the reverse osmosis system. So then you've got to get into pumps and water flow and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot of other conversations we're going to have. Okay? All right, so that's it. That is
it.
Which DI resin should I use?
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining.
Cheers.